The joint Navy-Marine combat training bay throbbed with noise and sweat. 30 recruits stood in loose formation, boots squealing faintly against the polished mat, their attention snapping to the instructor as she entered. Fluorescent lights glared off steel walls, the air heavy with heat and attitude. Lieutenant Commander Erin Carter stepped forward, her right arm secured in a rigid brace from wrist to elbow. She moved with calm, precision, measured, steady, unshaken. Across the mat stood Sergeant Mason Briggs, all mass and swagger, a grin spreading across his face. Leaning toward the Marines, he muttered just loudly enough. Didn't know the Navy was recruiting one-armed instructors now. Low laughter rippled through the line, uneasy, contagious. Carter didn't react. She adjusted the strap of her sling, avoided every gaze, and said evenly, "Force is loud. Control is silent. Watch carefully." The laughter died. Curiosity took its place. Even Briggs's smirk hesitated as silence settled over the mat. The lesson was about to begin, and before the hour ended, arrogance would find its limits. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true accounts of courage, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from today, Erin. Carter didn't fill space when she entered a room. She shaped it. Early 30s, composed posture, a calm that made noise feel intrusive. Her movements were precise in ways most people couldn't name, deliberate steps, measured breaths, hands that never fidgeted. The brace on her right arm looked clinical, inconvenient, but nothing about her suggested fragility. She wore it like a tool, not a crutch. She was an interbranch instructor now, a Navy SEAL. Officer temporarily assigned to the joint facility after an operation in Helmand went wrong. The official report used sterile language, degraded mobility, soft tissue trauma, nerve monitoring. The truth lived in the quiet behind her eyes. A helicopter landing zone swallowed by dust. The snap of small arms fire. A shift of weight that saved someone else and cost her. She still ran the perimeter at dawn, brace strapped tight. Still demonstrated leverage and reflex with flawless balance. Pain was never the point. Control was. Most recruits called her ma'am and tried not to stare. They noticed the small black falcon tattoo beneath her left sleeve when she reached for a marker. The faint scar near her wrist. Rumors spread quickly. She broke her arm sparring. She'd been pulled from deployment. She was done fighting. The mess hall whispers grew legs until they sounded like truth. Those who'd served long enough knew better. Commander Blake Hensley Gray at the temples. Quiet and presence read his clipboard as if the pages already agreed with him. When he spoke to Carter, it was with unadorned respect. "Morning, Lieutenant Commander. How's the range?" "Holding steady, sir." She avoided small talk. Her locker was kept with near ritual precision. Spare sling, journal, a single photograph that never moved. 3 people in desert camis before a battered Hesco wall. Dust on their boots, initials and a date scrawled in Sharpie. She neither explained it nor hid it. Her classes weren't about dominance. They were about options, ones that appeared invisible to an opponent. She drew angles on the whiteboard, pathways where size became leverage for someone else. "You can't outbench someone twice your weight," she'd say as chalk squeaked. "But you can convince his joints to speak your language." She demonstrated with her left hand only, slow and exact. Pausing at the point where a shoulder or knee could choose to break or yield. She never said pain. She didn't need to. Some recruits scribbled notes furiously. Others waited, smirking, confident that muscle would eventually assert itself. Sergeant Mason Briggs thrived in that space. Marine instructor, chest like a wall, voice that tried to own the room. "We teach finish, not finesse," he'd bark. "You start something with me, you end it." The recruits loved him for it. He offered certainty, hard, simple, loud. Carter to Briggs. It was contradiction piled on contradiction. A woman visibly injured, preaching restraint. He didn't know what to do with the absence of spectacle, so he filled it with jokes. She let them pass through her like wind through an open door. Hensley noticed everything and commented on almost nothing. "Good tempo," he said once as Carter rolled the mat. "They default to pushing," she replied. "Everyone does," he said softly, "until the wall pushes back."
At night.
Her arm bothered her most. Days were easy. Days had purpose. In the dark, she counted breaths until memory loosened its grip. Then ran the perimeter at first light. Sling snug, left arm swinging steady. The trainees speculated endlessly. She was hiding. She was rebuilding. She was warning them. None were entirely wrong, and all missed the center. She corrected little unless it involved posture, grip, or alignment. Don't give your enemy free choices, she'd say. Applying gentle pressure, Briggs' preferred thunderpads slammed, bruises earned, pride fed. He once asked, half mocking, "You winning fights with chalk out there?" "I'm preventing them," she answered. Same difference. Different enough to live. She never postured. The falcon inked on her arm, spoke only to those who could read it. When the two styles finally faced each other under the harsh lights, the room felt drawn tight like a bowstring. Carter stood calm, gaze level. Briggs rolled his shoulders, loading himself with bravado. Commander Hensley watched from the edge, arms folded, knowing that respect is rarely taught by speeches. It's taught when the body learns what the mind has been avoiding. The first demonstration should have been routine. Carter explained redirection, invited a volunteer, and dropped him to his knees with effortless precision. Silence followed. Briggs clapped once. "Cute. Try it on someone who fights back," Hensley warned him. Briggs grinned and stepped onto the mat. 4 seconds, maybe less. A shift, a pivot. Briggs hit the mat hard enough to shake the room. Carter released him gently and turned back to the class. "Next principle," she said. Timing. The laughter never returned. That night, Briggs replayed the moment endlessly, the leverage, ease, the fact that she didn't even need both arms. By morning, humiliation had hardened into challenge. The next day, he appeared unannounced, gloves in hand. "You busy teaching?" he called. "Or ready to back it up?" No rank, no schedule. Just reflexes. Carter tightened her brace. Reflexes it is. They squared off as the recruits pressed in, the air electric with anticipation and dread. Control was about to speak again quietly. Asterisk. Briggs circled, shoulders loose and rolling. Erin remained, compact center low, stance disciplined, eyes steady. He feinted once, then again, and then, faster than thought, lunged and seized her right arm. Twisting hard, a sharp crack split the bay like a rifle shot. Everything froze. The sound ricocheted off concrete and steel, hanging in the air. Erin didn't cry out. She didn't even blink. Her expression stayed composed, jaw tight, breath controlled. She drew one slow inhale through her nose, let it out evenly, and said quietly, "That's enough." Briggs stopped mid-motion, the realization arriving too late. She had already stepped back, reset the sling, and turned toward the exit. Each step was deliberate, balanced, silent, no stumble, no limp. Just control. She passed the recruits as if nothing remarkable had occurred. For several seconds, no one spoke. The silence felt alive, heavy, accusatory. Then the whispers started. She didn't even flinch. "She's done. That's it for her." Did you see how she looked at him like she was calculating something? By evening, the story had raced through the barracks. Some said she'd gone straight to the infirmary. Others swore she'd filed a formal complaint. But those who had seen her eyes as she left the mat knew better. There was no anger in them, only assessment. At 1900, the training log updated. One line drew every eye. Reflex evaluation minus 2,100 hours. No exemptions requested. It wasn't a report. It wasn't a protest. It was an invitation. Instructors murmured in corridors. "You think she's serious? She can't fight with that arm." You ever seen her back down? Commander Hensley read the entry twice, closed the folder slowly, and said under his breath, "She's going to teach him what control really means." That night, recruits lay on their bunks replaying the sound, the crack, the stillness afterward. They weren't sure anymore who deserved sympathy. The narrator's voice breaks in. "What would you have done?" Step in or stay silent. Rumors move faster than orders. By breakfast, The entire base had heard some version of the pop, how it leaped off the concrete and came back like an accusation. In one telling, she staggered. In another, she smiled. The truth was quieter than either and harder to hold. "They're filing on him," someone said in the chow line. "She's reporting him." "No, she's not that type. She'll settle it in-house." "Then what's a reflex evaluation?" "That sounds serious." Serious, here, meant documented, observed, unavoidable. People started noticing what they'd missed when all they'd seen was a sling. The way Commander Hensley addressed her in the corridor shifted conversations. He didn't slow for many people, but he slowed for her. Not hesitant, measured. When he said "ma'am," it sounded less like protocol and more like acknowledgement. Once a corporal nearly collided with her rounding a corner. Hensley lifted a hand. "Watch your lanes." The corporal apologized. But what lingered was the way Carter nodded to Hensley, not up or down, but level, as if respect were flat ground they both stood on. In the gym, talk came in bursts between sets. "You see that ink under her sleeve? Falcon, or something like it? It's plenty of birds." "Yeah, but that one looked earned." On the range, someone swore they'd seen her shoot one-handed at 50 yards, grouping so tight the holes merged. The petty officer dismissed it as bravado until he checked the score sheet himself. 3 holes, not 6. Initialed. Left-hand evil. No audience. No commentary. Just proof. Outside the locker room, a private lingered too long on a photo inside. An open locker, 3 figures in desert camis, before a Hesco wall, half squinting, half smiling. Initials, a date. A place anyone who remembered deployments would recognize. "Sir," the private asked as Hensley passed, "do you think that's... I think you should mind your equipment, Marine?" "Yes, sir." The locker closed softly. By lunch, speculation had evolved into myth. "She was out there, Kandahar, maybe. They don't send women there." "You sure about that?" Sailor stirring coffee without looking up said quietly. "The place doesn't care what you are. It cares what you can carry." The rumors kept mutating. Units without names. Falcons that weren't just birds. Ink that wasn't decorative. Old school lines functional, earned. The more people talked, the less anyone laughed. What stuck most was how she moved after the pop. No tremor, no hitch. The breathing. In through the nose. Slow out. Like setting down a heavy box. "That's pain control," a medic said. "Learned," someone answered. "Not luck." The word "learned" lingered. By late afternoon, the reflex base schedule was wiped clean except for one line. Reflex evaluation, minus 2,000 hours. No exemptions requested. Instructors compared watches without meaning to. Few drifted past the bay under the excuse of equipment checks. The lights were already on. Carter was inside alone at first, seated cross-legged on the mat, sling snug, left hand tracing slow arcs through the air. Patterns, not strikes. Balance, not blows. Her shoulder and hips argued the case where Chalk once had. An ensign paused in the doorway, curiosity outweighing discretion. Erin rose in one smooth motion, tested a step sequence, pivoted, lowered. Again, with Karaz, if the mat were something to be respected. The ensign realized she wasn't rehearsing attacks. She was rehearsing decisions. He left quietly. By evening, confidence across the barracks tilted into doubt. She's going to get him fired. "You didn't read the log? This isn't admin." "Then what is it?" "Instruction." For anyone who thinks force makes the rules, even Briggs felt the rumors bite. He hammered the heavy bag until his knuckles went numb, telling himself mass and momentum didn't lie. Still a thought slipped through. What if her silence wasn't surrender? What if quiet was an angle? Hensley walked the perimeter at dusk, paused by the reflex bay, and watched from the shadows. Carter rolled to her feet, gauged the wall with a glance. "Evening, sir." "Evening." "You good for this?" "Yes, sir." No exemptions requested, none needed. When he left, he didn't close the door. Light spilled into the hallway, invitation or warning, depending on who noticed. Later, the watch petty officer lingered, listening. "She's not practicing hits," he logged. "She's practicing stops." By nightfall, the base felt different, quieter, intent. The clock crept toward 2100. Laughter faded quickly when it surfaced. The corridor to the bay became a funnel of softened footsteps. At exactly 2100, the base seemed to hold its breath. The reflex bay was cold under fluorescent hum. Mats aligned perfectly. Cameras steady. Timer glowing green. Clipboard squared. Erin Carter entered without ceremony. Right arm bound in black. Left hand loose. She paused at the mat's edge, then stepped forward with the balance of someone who had learned to make unstable ground behave. From above, Hensley spoke into the mic, calm, precise. Reflex bay live. Standard safety. All movements recorded. Evaluation. Leverage and redirection under limited mobility. Instructor Carter, ready? Ready. Participants one at a time. Tap ends engagement. 3 Marines lined the wall. Corporal Alvarez. Alvarez stepped in. Erin mirrored him, stance tight. The timer beeped. Alvarez grabbed. Erin turned to fraction, let momentum speak, guided his wrist, tipped his balance. He folded knee. Tap. 4 seconds. No applause. Return, Hensley said. Erin reset. The sling strap creaked softly. Lance Corporal Dean. Dean came fast, trying to replace caution with speed. Erin stepped, redirected, never grabbing, only persuading. And the room understood finally that what she was teaching had never been about injury. It was about control. She rotated him smoothly, guiding his leg into a bend just short of locking, and the mat received him before pride could. Tap 6 seconds if you counted the hesitation where he weighed stubbornness against sense. Sergeant Rivas had watched the first 2 carefully and chose a different approach. He came in compact, center low, elbows tight. Hands close, someone who understood that the first person to open gives the advantage away. Erin matched his height and balance. For a brief moment, they looked like 2 chess pieces sharing the same square, without contact. Then Rivas tried to move her with his shoulder. She allowed it not backward, but sideways, slipping into a gap he hadn't seen. Her left forearm brushed his tricep for an instant. No force. It's contact. He folded as if a joint had suggested surrender, and he'd accepted the terms. Tap it 7 seconds longer because he made it difficult, and she honored that. 3 bodies, 3 controlled descents, 3 taps, no injuries, no embarrassment. Just the mathematics of movement done right. Reset, Hensley said. The word hung between silence and inevitability. Mason Briggs rolled his shoulders once and stepped onto the mat. He ignored the instructors along the wall, and the recruits clustered at the doorway, hands hooked into their belts to keep from pointing. His attention stayed on Erin alone. She met his gaze, and there was nothing performative in it, no challenge, no apology. Just a steady calm that seemed to slow the room. Briggs cracked his neck, louder than necessary. "You sure you're cleared to fight, ma'am?" Politeness capped the sentence like a lid on boiling water. "I'm cleared to demonstrate correction," she replied. Wasn't bravado. It sounded like an agenda. Item 1. The timer beeped. Briggs moved like a man hauling an anchor he didn't know was there. Anger sat high in his shoulders, visible in the tension of his traps and the hard line of his jaw. He charged straight in, heavy, trying to force an early exchange. Erin let him claim the center, while she claimed the angle. 1 step, then another. Her left foot traced a diagonal not retreat, but reframing. He reached for her left wrist, predictable, because bruised egos favor certainty. She didn't pull away. She offered it, palm open, elbow loose, then rotated precisely, thumb settling into the weak seam of his grip. His fingers closed on nothing. He recovered fast, trying to drive her back with chest and shoulder. She slid again, a quarter circle that curved his mass into an arc. He followed. Momentum obeys bad decisions as readily as good ones. He attempted a trip, right foot hooking behind her left heel. She sensed the intent of fraction before contact and let her heel lift as if the floor had dropped. His leg cut through empty space. His weight shifted to recover. She touched his wrist again light, almost dismissive, and redirected his shoulder line past his hips. For a heartbeat, his center wasn't his. He tried to muscle it back, reaching for the sling strap across her chest, thinking it would serve as a handle. It didn't. Erin stepped into the pull and turned with it, her torso swinging like a door on a well-oiled hinge. The sling stayed firm as she absorbed the force through ribs and core, stealing his leverage without endangering her arm. Grunted, frustration bleeding through. He'd counted on speed to close distance, but speed only magnified the error. His next lunge overreached. His knee extended past safe. She didn't punish it. She marked it. Her left hand slid along his forearm, guiding rather than gripping, as she pivoted on the ball of her foot. The sweep wasn't dramatic, no scythe, no flourish, just a firm invitation for his foot to leave the ground. Gravity accepted. He landed on hands and knees controlled, reflexes intact, began to rise. That was when she finished. With weight or torque, not by forcing a joint beyond tolerance, but by laying her left forearm across the line where his shoulder could spiral and pinning it with alignment, not mass. It wasn't a choke. It wasn't a crank. It was geometry, executed with bone and muscle. "Stop," she said. The word stood calm in the current. For a second, it didn't register. Then it reached the part of him that still obeyed instruction. He tapped twice. Not angry, not theatrical, just fact. She released immediately and stepped back, posture neutral. He remained where he was longer than pride would have liked, breath sawing once, twice, then settling. When he stood, he didn't scan the room. He kept his eyes down until he had himself back. Then he met her gaze. "You wanted proof," she said, voice steady enough for a record. "Consider it logged." The words didn't strike. They settled, belonging to the formality of the evaluation and the unspoken agreement that this had been about clarity, not winning. No one breathed or it felt that way. The camera's red light stayed solid. The timer continued counting seconds no one would remember. Fluorescent hum threaded the stillness. Hensley waited. He let the silence do the work of translation, letting what they'd seen write itself into muscle memory. When he finally keyed the mic, his tone hadn't changed. Engagement concluded. All participants were ordered off the mat. Briggs dipped his head once, almost unconsciously, and stepped away. He avoided the nearest exit, choosing instead the longer path along the far edge, as though distance might grant him time to reconcile who he had been when he entered with who he would be when he left. He didn't look toward the recruits clustered at the doorway. He didn't follow him with their eyes. Respect, when earned honestly, does not stare. Erin crossed to the table, signed the clipboard in neat, unhurried strokes, and returned the pen to the exact alignment she'd found it in. She adjusted the sling strap knot from discomfort, but as if reminding her body of limits it already understood. Then she stood, hands at her sides, neither waiting for applause nor needing it if it came. An instructor near the door swallowed audibly. Somewhere in the back, someone exhaled. The room seemed to warm a degree as people remembered the simple fact of blood and breath. Carter Ensley called from the gallery, a single word, both question and commendation. She looked up. He gave the slightest nod. That was all. Nothing else could be added without diminishing what had already settled into place. The recruits drifted away in pairs and singles, speaking softly when they spoke at all. They didn't discuss the fall. They talked about the moments. Before at the angle, the refusal to engage on the wrong terms, the discipline of precision. Technique over strength. Precision over pride. Phrases she'd once written on whiteboards and traced in the air had migrated into muscle and bone. Briggs stood alone in the hallway, hands braced on his hips, staring at the floor as if it might reveal a route he'd never taken. A petty officer passed without slowing. Again, respect, no gawking, no pity, no humor. Inside the bay, Erin knelt and lifted a corner of matte tape that had begun to peel. She pressed it flat with the side of her fist, smoothing the surface until it lay true again. When she stood, she checked the camera's red light, then the timer, then the clipboard. Everything in order. The room, like the lesson, restored to where it belonged. For a long moment, no one breathed, or rather they did, but with awareness. The silence wasn't empty, it was full charged with the understanding that control, when done correctly, doesn't announce itself. It arrives, demonstrates, and leaves nothing broken that didn't need to be. Morning broke cleaner than it had any right to. Sunlight spilled across the concrete courtyard, glinting off windows whose blinds never quite closed. Burnt coffee mingled with salt air from the docks. By 0630, the base was awake, talking, speculating, repeating. She fought with one arm. No chance. I saw the footage. Cold pin. Never even used the injured side. Rumor moved like caffeine through the bloodstream. But each retelling sharpened rather than distorted. No one exaggerated. There was no need. The truth carried enough weight on its own. By the time the mess hall opened, the entire facility knew. Lieutenant Commander Erin Carter had gone toe-to-toe with Sergeant Mason Briggs and left the mat standing silent. Unbroken. At 0800, an official notice flashed across the base network. Disciplinary review. Attendance restricted. Restricted never meant empty. When the time came, the room filled with pressed, khaki, salt-stiff fatigues, and two Navy lawyers carefully pretending not to be interested. At the far end sat Commander Blake Hensley, posture exacts, papers arranged with geometric precision. Erin Carter entered alone, left arm free, right still secured in its black brace. Mason Briggs followed one step behind, jaw set, eyes fixed forward. Hensley waited until every chair settled. This review concerns an incident during unscheduled training between Sergeant Briggs and Lieutenant Commander Carter. Footage and logs have been examined. The facts are not in dispute. He opened a folder and read without inflection. Sergeant Briggs initiated physical contact outside authorized parameters. A band maneuver was employed, resulting in re-injuring to an existing condition. Intentional application confirmed by review board. A rustle passed through the room like wind across canvas. Effective immediately. Sergeant Briggs is suspended without pay pending reassignment and mandatory retraining. The words landed hard and clean. Surgical Briggs said nothing, his gaze fixed on the tabletop, hands clasped tight, knuckles whitening. The quiet thickened, the kind that comes when pride finally recognizes consequence. Hensley turned the page. Lieutenant Commander Erin Carter, he said, meeting her eyes. Your response under duress demonstrated adaptive control and restraint beyond standard expectation. Someone coughed. Another leaned forward. In recognition of professional conduct and discipline under provocation, commendation is approved. He paused, then added calmly, for the record, Lieutenant Commander Carter. Former Task Unit Falcon, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. The room froze. Chairs creaked as people shifted, needing to see her again, to reconcile the quiet instructor they'd dismissed with the name they now heard. DevGru. Falcon. Those words didn't circulate lightly. Belonged to mission spoken of in initials and lowered voices. Briggs slowly lifted his head. Whatever fight he'd carried was gone, replaced by understanding. Hensley closed the folder. Proceed as you see fit, Lieutenant Commander. The board thanks you for your instruction. Erin nodded once. Acknowledged, sir. When she stood, no one moved for a heartbeat. Then chairs scraped back almost involuntarily. People rose without knowing why. Asterisk, she didn't look around. She adjusted the sling and walked out, measured as ever. The hallway was quieter than usual. Recruits slowed, uncertain whether to salute or simply step aside. A faint nod from her resolved it. Word reached the barracks before she crossed the courtyard. Whispers solidified into certainty. Falcon, DevGru. The tattoo that had once looked symbolic now carried mass. It wasn't decoration. It was compressed history. That bird, Corporal murmured, near the vending machine. That's earned. Inside her office, Erin set the accommodation file aside untouched. Instead, she unfolded a photograph taped inside her locker. 3 figures in dust, names printed beneath. She brushed its edge with her thumb, then closed the door. Across the compound, Briggs sat alone on the PT bleachers, suspension form resting on his lap. The wind caught it. It didn't. The paper slid beneath the bench. Didn't think she'd still be standing, he muttered. She never stopped, came a quiet reply. Hensley stood behind him. By midday, the base felt different. The rumor cycle burned out, leaving something cleaner behind. Respect. Lesson plans changed. Voices lowered. Its precision replaced bravado. By week's end, new phrase appeared, stenciled beneath the camera in the reflex bay. Control beats force. Precision beats pride. No one claimed it. At dawn, Erin returned alone. The lights buzzed awake. She moved through her warm-up, one-handed, unhurried, exact. Hensley sometimes watched from the corridor, coffee cooling in his hand. "Hell of a lesson," he said once. "Just maintenance, sir." Maintenance keeps a base running. The camera caught her standing in soft light, falcon ink visible for a breath before shadow reclaimed it. Outside, the flag climbed the pole. Strength isn't domination. Courage isn't painlessness. And sometimes the quietest person teaches the loudest lesson. Erin Carter never taught them how to fight. She taught them how to restrand, how to win without losing themselves.